Okay, so just welcome everybody. This is we're working with Pathwork Guide Lecture number 191 this evening, and there's a 258 channeled lectures that are called Pathwork Guide Lectures that are available for free online for new people or people just listening into these discussion tapes, and so you can find them at pathwork.org. And we find them very useful in kind of helping navigate good maps of life. And so this is lecture number 191. It was originally channeled April 23rd, 1971. The woman that channels these lectures, her name was Eva Pyracus, and she was a medium originally from Europe. She was in Austria, I believe, originally right before the war, and immigrated here. And so she opened this channel, and these lectures began in 1957, I believe, and then continued until 1978 when she passed away. So this lecture is called Inner and Outer Experience. And just to, let everybody know, we're just, I'm going to read a little bit and I'll stop and discuss or comment, and you're welcome to stop me at any point. And if you have a question or a comment that you want to make, and I will try to pause periodically, but it's fine to just break in. So, greetings, blessings, and love are pouring forth for everyone here, wherever you need them most on your journey through life. Many philosophies agree on the importance of experience. They postulate that the true meaning of life is experiencing it in all its facets and variations, in its full depth and breadth. A being who enters this sphere of life, the material earth, is drawn into it because of her or his limited state of consciousness, in which true reality is blurred to a large extent. The only way the consciousness can be expanded is by experiencing life to its fullest and from all its facets. This requires that the being enter material life again and again until all the blocks against experiencing life are eliminated and he or she has savored, tasted, and assimilated all of life. So let me pause there. I mean, that seems like a tall order in some ways, right? Any comments or reactions to any of that? So it seems to land okay. I mean, I think for me, it's definitely, like clear that what we want to do is have, a full experience of life. And that's in our hearts and in our desire. I remember Joseph Campbell also said, we're not searching for a meaning for life, we're searching for an experience of life, right? And so the guide would be echoing that, and it makes some sense. We can feel that truth within us, that what we want is the fullness somehow of experience in life.
So, Darlene, would you say like that is a way of like kind of explaining, how the pathwork always, so we come into this earth with a task to fulfill, and like we don't really know what the task is until you start expanding your consciousness a little bit. I think that's how I hear it.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like there's Earth is like a place where our consciousness can evolve through our willingness to experience and be here. And so we're both drawn here and we want that experience, but as he explains in this, there's also, fears and blocks and that kind of thing. And so that's a part of, the work that we, are doing. And so,
I say eliminate our images.
Right. So he says, usually when humans hear the word experience, they think of outer experience. And this, however, is not the meaning of the word. The real meaning is the inner experience. You know that you may experience all things outwardly, but if the inner experience is inhibited, the outer experience will mean little. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a time in your life or you remember a situation where that kind of happened, where, you were in the midst of, all kinds of interesting, outer experience, but somehow you weren't able to take it in. You were, unable to really, be there somehow to, meet it and have the experience for yourself. And so he says, you can travel all over the world and you can be in many different situations and experiment with every conceivable experience under the sun. You can approach life in all its different facets, art, nature, science. You can do all things, learn everything your brain can master. But if your capacity for inner experience is dead, all outer experiences will add little, if anything, to your conscious life. So he's saying, we have to feel life also to be added to our conscious life, to evolve, right? To expand. And so often a full outer experience without the inner experience can even increase despair because one does not understand the causes of the experience, and that is very disquieting. Having everything they ever wanted, people still cannot remove a nagging dissatisfaction. The faster they run, the more they grab, the more elusive life seems, because the capacity for inner experience has not been cultivated, or worse, it has been inadvertently eliminated. So inner experience is possible only when you can feel. If feelings are blocked, no inner experience is possible. Lack of feelings deadens all of life and makes it impossible for you to fulfill yours. You will have to come back over and over until you learn to savor experience to whatever degree this is possible at your particular stage of consciousness. To savor life in its fullest, you must eliminate your defenses against feelings. You must go through your fear of unpleasurable, painful feelings. Last time we were talking about sort of the particular feelings that felt like, the worst death, that we most resisted and, were afraid of, right? And so this lecture is kind of pointing in that direction, right? And also saying that the answer is to actually feel through these. And, we've all probably had the experience of the intensity of defense that we're feeling when, we get close to those experiences. So we have a lot of inner, avoidance. And as Jane said, it's kind of connected to our images, right? That kind of thing. So these are blocks that unconsciously, it's not like we're consciously, we might say, yes, I want to feel everything in life. But, even when we really are aware of, yeah, I want to feel this really hard feeling, sometimes energetically we still unconsciously defend, right? Because we've been trained to do that. The defense is there sort of automatically and habitually inside of us now. And so we, actually in a way have to dismantle some of that in order to open and receive all of our feelings. So he says, you will have to come back over and over until you learn to savor experience. To savor life in its fullest, you must eliminate your defenses against feelings. You must go through your fear of unpleasurable, painful feelings. So I don't know if you guys can connect, like bring to mind for yourselves, like, is there a particular feeling that you come, that jumps out at you, that's, what you would call your unpleasurable or painful feeling that you fear or you don't want, you don't like to feel, what see if you can just get an example of one. Sometimes it helps to ground the lectures a little bit if we can find an example in our own experience.
So you want somebody to share, or you just
Sure,
say?
absolutely. Yeah, help. Come on in, Walter. What would
So
you
for
share?
me, an unpleasurable, painful feeling is alone.
Alone. Okay.
I've spent most of my life trying to avoid feeling alone.
Alone. Yeah.
Loneliness. Yeah.
Yeah. This loneliness, okay. And so see, as as we go through this lecture, if what he's saying kind of can also apply, because he sort of takes us on a journey here with these feelings and tries to help us understand why and that we need to go ahead and allow ourselves to feel them, and then how sometimes we can get to them and help ourselves, right? And I can talk to that as we go as well. But so that's a feeling that you're recognizing that you have been trying to avoid all your life. And so are you aware of the different ways that you usually, your go-tos for trying to avoid that? Are there, particular habits or patterns or ways to do that?
Getting involved in the wrong relationships for the wrong reasons. I mean, that's a simple one, but yeah, I mean, there's others. There's distractions, there's sedations.
Exactly.
I've kind of done a lot to keep myself from feeling those things.
Right. Very good. Exactly. And so like also if you go in and just, you can just kind of gently drop in this question, why is like certain feelings are difficult, right? But sometimes there's these certain, there's one feeling that feels the worst, right? So it's kind of like being curious a little bit, like what really is behind this feeling of loneliness that makes it so unbearable? Is there, some story, judgment, way of, looking at this loneliness? Does it, I mean, one example would be, like when I feel my loneliness, I immediately think I'm pathetic or something like that, right? So you have a feeling and you have a judgment of that feeling in some way. Can be one form of, sort of hard pain and reason why that we resist feeling certain things. But you can explore. So if you have an answer, that's fine. But if not, just sit with that for a while.
I'll share something. Like I've learned that when I'm feeling self-pity, that what I really don't want to feel is my belief that I'm lacking something, that I lack, which is a very difficult feeling to feel. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe, I mean, this might be it's interesting to me, like to usually kind of explore when we find a feeling that we know is a difficult one for us, to kind of try to separate out, the actual feeling from the thought form of it, or some thought form connected to it, right? So when you connect with this sense of lack that feels difficult, see if you can, notice, like, is that an energy sensation, kind of, emptiness, hole in the body somewhere, kind of like direct experience of lack,
Well,
and yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually, it's like when I notice that I'm like kind of like whining, moaning, self-pity, like poor me.
Right.
Everybody is doing better than me. Everybody's making more money than me. It's like this energetic field where I just get like my energy just gets like really condensed and low. And then I've had to explore that. Like it sort of is like that common denominator. that just keep
Right.
coming up. And then all of a sudden, like, it's like when the time is right, or when I've prayed and asked for help, it's amazing when I was able to get to the pain of lack that I'm perceiving through my eyes, that image. It was came to me, that was like an
Right.
image that I lack.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is one of the things he's saying in this lecture is when we can get to just the pure feeling of the lack without the stories that are connected to it, right? Then we can move through it in a way that allows us to, like come out the other side and be fine. And whenever we don't do that, we end up accumulating, stagnating, creating these blocks and carrying all of this stuff. So, but yeah, good example. And the key, is really to notice the difference between like you're saying, those descriptions, that are the self-pitying one, oh, poor me, or, somehow they have it and I don't, or, I never have it. And that's a kind of a story, that's like this internal dialogue inside. And that's one level of it, but that also creates an inner feeling in our energy system. And if we can go in and just experience directly that energetic experience, that's what I think he's referring to in this lecture, of feeling the inner experience versus the outer. So good examples. Okay. So I'm not sure where I left us. I'll back up a little bit and see. It says, the way it is at this moment, further back than that. So he's saying that we kind of have to recycle and keep going through these feelings until we can, stop being afraid of them and feel through all of this. And he says at this moment, it may be that a lot of what we're feeling is results of feelings from the past that have not been fully experienced and thus lie stagnant, forming a block in the system. And so when we had, didn't move a feeling through, now we kind of are storing it in our pockets. We've got all of these pockets where we've stored all of these unfelt feelings from the past. And oftentimes they're kind of thematic in a way. So when you fear a feeling, we block the experience, anesthetize ourselves, and then the numbing and denying, which seems the only protection against some unbearable pain and suffering. But we begin to find out that it is the fight against what we're fearing that actually creates the real suffering. So this is kind of an important thing to begin to understand and actually see, as we work with this stuff directly. It's not something to believe, it's something to directly experience, that that really the defenses against the suffering are where we really create most of our real suffering. He says, no matter what is inflicted upon you from the outside, when you are helpless and defenseless, it cannot become a detriment in your life. It cannot cripple you when you learn to receive it in the right and healthy way. This is the only way you can truly eliminate what is undesirable. When you dare experience inwardly what comes to you, it will cease to be a threat. So I want to just point out here, and this is like amazing to me, like how often, we have these systems that are built, to kind of control what comes to us. And so the guide is saying right here, that we have to dare experience inwardly whatever comes to us. And as we're, sort of opening to experience with that, you might become also really aware more of how quickly you kind of deny experience, right? Something comes to you and you're immediately trying to control it, trying to manipulate it, trying to, make it something else, trying to, somehow use our will and our agency and our creativity. I mean, it's in some ways natural, right? But we're doing it so automatically that we're not even kind of aware of what's underlying that, and this kind of need to be in control from this ego place, rather than kind of work with and be present to what life brings to us. So we started this lecture talking about being open and receptive, and life has all of this wonderful experience that we long to have, but like really we're terrified of most of it, and we're continually sort of trying to control it. So again, all of these things are just sort of pointing to things to become aware of in ourselves a little more. It's a path of self-knowledge. And so he says, in this lecture, I shall point out further the ramifications and the significance of inner emotional experience and what happens to the human entity when such experience and feelings are blocked. As I have often said, fear is the most destructive emotion imaginable. Fear that is not met and therefore transcended becomes poisonous, toxic energy. Fear that is not even conscious and therefore appears indirectly is that much more debilitating. The fear of feelings is perhaps the most insidious of all. For if you fear a real danger, it is something you can overcome. Even exaggerated fear of an outer occurrence would not be so harmful, except that such an unrealistic phobia must be an expression of unrecognized and unexperienced feelings. Anything outside of you can be dealt with on the level of outer action. Feelings can be dealt with only as they are being experienced, not when they are denied. And of course, as children, we really had a lot of conditioning and pressure in our outer environment, around all of our feelings, and any feelings that our parents denied in themselves, they were going to deny in us. And, so there's a lot of, suppression that we learned, very early. So it's not like, we did it all wrong. We survived. But what we have to now do is be conscious and unravel it all, right? And so, like you're saying, there's a lot of buried old feelings. And part of that is that they keep kind of recreating themselves because they're trying to get resolved and trying to be felt through. And until we can do that, we just kind of just keep recycling them. So, says anything outside of you can be dealt with on the level of outer action. Okay, we read that part. When you are afraid of pain, loneliness, or of a hurt to your pride, or a rejection, or frustration of your will or desires, in all these cases, your primary feeling is fear. So we were sort of talking last time about, there's the pain of rejection is one of these, deep pains. You were mentioning the pain of loneliness. It's right there, Walter. There's the pain that, is kind of my one pain, which is helplessness, right? And frustration of my will, right? And then, I think, Frank, you were talking about the pain of chaos and, confusion and, that kind of thing. So, there's these things that we, all quote unquote can't stand, right? And whatever we're saying we can't stand, it's really helpful to pay attention to, because that's really exactly what we need to take responsibility for and what we need to find our legs to put under us to be able to stand. So only when you experience what you fear, say rejection, will you experience the pain of it. So we are dealing basically with the fear of pain. And when you go into the fear, you can experience the pain. So sometimes there's layers, and so now we have the fear of the pain, right? And we need to feel the pain ultimately, right? But now we also have to feel the fear and the pain. And only then will the pain genuinely dissolve, and you will have mastered a slice of life that you will no longer need to avoid. When you blindly avoid your fear of pain until you no longer know that you fear a specific pain and are not aware why you feel numbed and deadened, you create a magnetic energy block within your psychic system. This magnetic block is a powerful force that inevitably draws to you the very experience you wanted to avoid. So there's a magnetizing effect in our energetic lives. So the pain you avoid must come to you from outside again and again until you can no longer avoid it. This is a law of life. So I don't know if other people, have experienced that, and if oftentimes we've experienced these patterns and these cycles, but how does it feel to kind of like hear this and say, well, it's just got to be that way, until we're willing to feel it, because that's just kind of a law of life. If you come into this life with such a fear, your life circumstance will bring forth the very condition that you avoided previously. When life circumstances in your early childhood again inflict pain and deprivation upon you, and you again protect yourself by denying the pain rather than experiencing it to its fullest, later life circumstances will replicate those early conditions until you open up to what you fear and let the experience be in you so that it can dissolve. So, see if you can sort of imagine, going back into looking at your history this way, these kind of patterns and replications. Does that connect for you? Do they feel like, oh, that, you were mentioning loneliness. So I guess, Walter, I would ask you, were you lonely as a child as well, right? Was that one of the feelings that, you can roll all the way back in time to as long as early as you remember in some way, right? Because oftentimes that's the case. So is that true for you with your loneliness, or did that seem to come upon you at a certain other point in life?
So as you're kind of reading through that, I'm almost toying with the idea that I'm not afraid of loneliness. I'm afraid of relationship.
Ah,
Because
interesting.
when we talk about the magnetic power pulling things in, I keep attracting in relationships. They're just not necessarily relationships I want. So maybe it's actually, that's what I need to be facing rather than the loneliness. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, it's beautiful that you're, learning more. I mean, that's the main thing is as we sit with this thing, it starts kind of opening up and more, questions come oftentimes than answers right away, but that's good because you're kind of opening and there's a lot to learn about this dynamic that you're describing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, to wonder about that seems good, and then maybe even like, well, and what, is there a particular type of relationship that, seems like you attract but don't want, can you kind of crystallize that in some way, like what is the common denominator maybe there or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
So when life circumstances in your early childhood inflict pain and deprivation upon you, and you protect yourself by denying the pain, right? Then we continue to kind of re-experience that. And so, I mean, the good news is, like, if we get this, like, oh, here I am again, and I hate being in this place, but instead of fighting it and resisting it, if we can wake up and realize, oh, I'm here to feel all of this, and then we can kind of consciously take it on and support that, then that's a real useful, place of, self-healing and self-empowerment and working with these kinds of dynamics within us. And it's very, clear. Sometimes it's not so easy, and we can use help and support with it in, sessions or groups. But, ultimately it's like, that we really are just trying to learn how to hold ourselves so we can face and feel into these energies that, we couldn't feel when we were little. They were too overwhelming, or they were, we had this idea that it would never end, well, here we are now, like, can we really, work with these feelings, because we have, somebody more mature with us, like trauma doesn't come from the event so much as is that, somebody else, traumatized us, or like, not, that's not the right way to say it, but we needed somebody to come and hold us in the trauma. And so if they rejected us in that trauma, or they rejected our feelings, and weren't willing to come and be present to our feelings, we assumed that our feelings were not, were dangerous or weren't worthy or something. And so we rejected them too. And that's where the real problem is. So a part of what we're learning how to do is, like when these feelings come up in the present, even though they're, seem to be about the most recent relationship or whatever, they're actually going way back to these old feelings. And if we can learn how to get present to the feelings, like the guide is recommending here, we can move through that and resolve it, clear it. He says, when you fully savor the painful experience, then you are truly overcoming it. Then the energy of the magnetic block dissolves, entering into the general flow of life within you. And the previously feared experience will no longer come to you. You may temporarily avoid the feared experience because your inner defenses shut off life so successfully that nothing touches you. And your willpower may build an eventful outer life that fills your inner void to a degree, as long as you do not hold still. However, this is but temporary peace before the storm. Crisis must come to you eventually to give you another opportunity to overcome your fear. The more you run from what you fear, the more energy you invest into blocking off the feared feeling, the more potent the magnetic energy block becomes, and the more certainly you attract the crisis that could be the healing agent whenever you choose to change the direction of your focus to inner living. Only a fearless soul can experience bliss, pleasure, joy, and peace. You can fulfill your potential for creativity and expansion of your spiritual being only when you are fearless and relaxed. If no part of your inner being has anything to cover up, defend, or protect, then the full potential of your creativity and capacity for pleasure can manifest in your personality. But if you guard against one expression of life in you, against one type of inner experience, it is logical that all other types must be equally hindered. This should be easy to see. In protecting yourself against your fear of pain or any other undesirable experience, you put yourself in a state of tension. Guardedness is tension. Pleasure and creativity can thrive only in a state of relaxation. You cannot express yourself when you hold tight against a movement in your inner life. You separate yourself from a vital part in yourself. No wonder you lose touch with yourself and no longer know who you are or what you are doing. You live in a state of constant guardedness, unbeknownst even to your own conscious mind. So right now, I mean, just take a scan, like, and just notice, like, are all your muscles kind of like chill and relaxed? We're just sitting here, listening to this lecture. So, it's like, just notice, like, where that truly relaxed, flowing state is. And most of the time, even when, there's, we're just in our normal, everyday, nothing particularly up reality, we carry a certain amount of excess tension in our bodies. It's always a little more than we need to be doing whatever we're doing, or maybe while we're doing it, we're, clenching our jaw, or we're, tapping our foot, or, there's oftentimes these, excess tensions that we can tune into. And it's a great meditation, right? Just to go in again, and witness yourself, and just say, hey, I'm here. It's okay. You can relax, you can let go, and just invite any of that excess tension to just bleed away, fade away. I mean, even maybe try that right now. Just go inside and, scan briefly, sort of, where are you holding a little tension in your body right now? And just breathe and, invite spaciousness, invite letting go, relaxing a little, and see if, this part is willing to let down and let go of that tension a little bit more, to enter into this flow that the guide is talking about. And so, and he's saying, also, like, when we notice this guardedness, it's like, then we can kind of ask, what precisely is it that we're guarding against? And, I mean, I think there's some kind of just general collective that we are always on guard, but oftentimes, we can answer these questions in deeply specific ways that really help us. It's like part of what we have to do is, question the whole thing, right? And so when we want to know what the truth is, it's like the more specific we can be, it helps. So what is it precisely that you guard against? In the last analysis, it is always a pain you have suffered. You cannot, of course, go further back than this lifetime, but this lifetime is all you need. Your early pains in this life are essentially those you have suffered in previous lives. Your accumulated residual energy block not only attracts the same events over again, but also makes you incapable of meeting new feeling experiences in a free and spiritually hygienic way. So in a sense, we incarnate back in with the unresolved feelings from before, right? And then we're involving, we're choosing a circumstance that actually will, recreate the same feeling in a different situation, different people, that kind of thing, maybe. But it's like partly because, we that's the only way to set it all free. So, we shouldn't judge ourselves about all of this, right? Because who we really are is the light, is the love, is the divine consciousness, right? That is really choosing to come in time and time and again, feeling this time and time and again to try to, help set it free. Because it can't be love when it's defense. And what we're here for as part of, our mission in every incarnation is to, try to, free up more love, free this defense, and allow it to become part of that oneness of flow, that love, that expansion. So he's saying that we can't really feel new experiences in a free way because the new feeling that cannot live in you, is added to the kind of residual reservoir. On the other hand, once your residual reservoir is emptied and you have fully experienced the past accumulations, the flow of your being will deal with new pains in a very different way. First of all, you will remain open and vulnerable, experiencing the pain softly, gently, without inner fight, and fully knowing why you are in pain. This integration of your experience will make the wave of pain pass slowly or quickly according to the nature of the experience, and the pain will dissolve into the stream of life within you. So this is a very beautiful and profound statement. People connecting it all. Have you been, one of the ways that I think I explored this a little bit is like with yoga or, other just physical ways, like when we like kind of stretch into a painful stretch, in yoga, like, and we just relax around it and we breathe and we, feel the feeling there, and it's like we're present to the feeling. Somehow that muscle opens a little more, right? And so in a way, it's a kind of similar thing in our emotional body. And the key is this, really being present to the pain, because it's like only when, like, the pain is unbearable when it feels rejected, alone, unseen, right, unheld. And in a sense, we learned ourselves not to hold it, because nobody else held it. So we just assumed, oh, this is not a pain that should be held, or, nobody showed us how to hold it. Nobody demonstrated that, right? And so we just learned to stuff it and to create these things. So we're just unlearning, something that, is part of every human being's kind of programming in our current stage of development. But the more that, we can understand it and support this and, like be present, feeling these feelings, having this inner experience, allowing the body. Most of the time the body knows how to digest our feelings. And so if we're in the sensation and the body is just moving with this wave, maybe it's moving in contractions of sobbing, or maybe it's moving in screams of, terror or whatever, but, there's a kind of, or maybe we're just sitting with it and feeling, like all of the energetic movement inside, right? Sometimes it's just like we become an ocean inside of ourselves, and there's all of this energy passing through, and sometimes it's not so pleasant, but we can stay with it and just follow it and seeking to move with it and understand and support that experience through. It is almost like birthing, right? And so we birth through the feeling, and then something new, something old is completed and something new can come in. So this open, relaxed state also makes available inspiration and resources that are otherwise inaccessible. You will be guided from within to find new ways of action that will be effective in your life and in your environment. A new, ever-increasing vibrancy will fill your being when you live in this way. You will be filled with the joyousness of knowing that all is well in the universe. When you use your will to avoid feared feelings and try forcefully to produce the joy that you cannot have unless you live in an unguarded state, your will must again and again be smashed by life, which cannot be manipulated by the fearful, small, controlling mind. When you substitute a forcing current, I must not experience that, or I must experience this, for a relaxed stream of consciousness, a flowing soul substance, you bring on crisis and more pain. The duality that characterizes human consciousness results primarily from fear that is not fully lived through and therefore dissolved. By saying in effect, this I must not experience, you create a duality. Your fear creates both a yes current and a no current. And that split current is the entire basis of the painful state of duality. Such duality can thrive only in a state of avoidance, a state of being closed to one thing, which creates a tense, urgent, grabbing movement in the opposite direction, which in turn prohibits the real flow of life. So are people recognizing this inside of themselves at all? Is it making some sense? Connecting? When strong inner denial exists, rage and violence follow. So we might think of this in terms of all of the recent shootings and continued, craziness that's happening, right? So this is a part of what we're going through collectively as well as individually, right? And so rage dissolves when the fear of pain is given up and the pain fully experienced. The pain dissolves into its original nature, the blissful, peaceful vibrancy of the river of life that flows through you and of which you are a part. Your fear of feelings, therefore, not only blocks bliss and the expression of creative life through you, but also splits you into a state of disunity. You can achieve a higher unified state of consciousness only by going through what you fear, never by avoiding it. When fear of your feelings induces you to block off your capacity to feel, the impoverishment creates the need for a substitution. The mind then becomes this substitution. In order not to feel your deadness, the impoverishment of your inner being, and to have a sense of existing, you use your outer mind much more than is natural. If you cannot exist through your flowing, feeling being, your intellect and will take most exclusive charge of your deadened feeling parts. They temporarily give you the illusion of being alive. But the aliveness is precarious. It is, in the long run, not even convincing, because consciousness without feeling lacks the spark of the spirit that puts a glow on life. Such incompleteness is dry and sterile. You may arrive at the most brilliant formulations with your mind, but if your mind is not unified with your inner feeling experience, you will, in secret moments, doubt your aliveness, the reality of your being. In this stage of evolution, in this civilization, humans frequently find themselves with highly developed minds, but unable to live fully. What is usually called an identity crisis is the condition of being split off from the feeling self, which in turn exists only when feelings are avoided and repressed. A person can never know who she or he is when the mind substitutes its so-called life for the inner feeling self. So we're going to go into, he's going to break down and look at some specific feelings and what happens when they are denied. Any comments here of this first part?
I was going to hit around the concept of imposter syndrome when I was talking about that, because your logical mind, you're looking at what you've accomplished but inside you don't have that connection, that true feeling inside, therefore it creates that conflict.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think, in many different levels, kind of imposters, because, it's like there's the guy has this thing where he talks about our mask, which is kind of the imposter, and he's saying, like the mind tries to, convince us or live out, this truth, but we feel the difference inside. And so good. Anybody else? So let us now look at what happens to specific feelings when they are denied. Let us take sadness. When something in you says, I must not be sad, I should not be sad, you rebel against a feeling that exists in you. This rebellious attitude creates the misconception in you that being sad is catastrophic, and that if this catastrophe befalls you, you must perish. So again, like there's this combination of the feeling and the thought, right? You know, and in this case, you know, like the feeling, we don't like it, you know, we don't want to feel it, you know, so we naturally kind of rebel against it. But it's in that rebellion then that also, you know, we exaggerate, right? We didn't stay with it. We don't know what it really feels. And so then we, you know, begin to feel like it's kind of catastrophic. And that, you know, it's going to kill us. You know, this is one of the things that he speaks of before. You know, he says, like, you know, all of our fears are really fears against feelings, right? And there isn't any feeling that's going to actually kill us, right? You know, we think we're going to die of it, but it's like, I mean, maybe you hear people are dying of heartbreak, but I think what they're really dying of is, you know, their lack of being able to go through, you know, and feel that it's the rigidity that creates the heart attack in a way. So, so it's this rebellious attitude that makes it, you know, a bigger deal than it is. And we kind of create this story in our mind, right? You know, it's death that's going to kill us. We can't stand it. This unspoken, unarticulated assumption creates fear, and often as the assumption becomes exaggerated, fear turns into terror. The terror of sadness creates a compulsive urge to avoid sadness. If life finally forces you to feel your sadness through the circumstances you inevitably attract, your terror arising from your conviction that you must perish produces such strong inner turmoil that you may indeed break down. So it's not the sadness that, you know, causes the death, but it is this, you know, fear and belief connected that, you know, it's like we can't stand it, right? So in the Pathwork, we work a lot about, you know, standing our ground, standing our feelings, standing up for ourselves, being a person of standing. You know, there's a lot, and it's all about our legs and our energetic connection to our legs and to the earth and to the ground, and, you know, and to the adult function of standing, right? You know, instead of being a child on the ground. So we're, you know, like sort of, it helps a lot energetically and physically to sometimes when we're feeling like, oh, this is a feeling I don't want to feel, or it's hard to stand, to literally go ground yourself, right? You know, and feel your legs under you and let the feeling come, but also feel the connection with the ground. So little aside there. So you may be utterly unaware of the rebellious anger in you. And this is also a really big key. So a lot of the terror is coming from our own rebellious anger. And it fuels the terror and the misconception that makes you struggle so arduously and painfully against the sadness. So when you experience sadness in this mental and emotional state, the experience is indeed unbearable. But not because straight sadness cannot be borne. You see how admixed it is, right? It's not just pure sadness. And we get ourselves into these states, it's kind of like a self-created suffering that is not necessary, except that we are trying to protect and defend ourselves, and then we uncautiously create this big mess. So any straight, clean feeling can easily be born, no matter what it is and why it exists. What is unbearably painful, frightening, and hopeless is the inner struggle that the misconception creates. So it's the misconception, the thought that's attached with it. This is the real meaning of the scriptural saying, According to thy belief, it shall be done unto thee. It does not mean that there are magical intercessions from heaven, reward for faith and punishment for doubt. It simply describes the dynamics I discuss here. The overactive mind, not necessarily conscious, produces the image, I will perish if I have to be sad. You build mental concepts that sustain the belief that sadness is unbearable and even dangerous, and thus you justify your refusal to feel sad. You may do this by building cases against people who make you sad. Your mind attempts to justify why you should not have to endure this feeling. Thus, you build illusions. And it always seems most difficult to abandon one's cherished illusions. Whenever an original experience, say of sadness and pain, is denied, it becomes displaced. It will be re-experienced in subsequent situations. Displaced and denied sadness becomes self-pity, hopelessness, depression. These emotions are indeed debilitating and destructive, whereas the direct original feeling of sadness, if fully experienced and consciously connected to its origin in this life, will dissipate. When you let it happen to you without manipulating it, by exaggerating or denying it, it will run its natural course. This is extremely important to remember and to practice. If the original clean experience of sadness is denied in any way and thus becomes distorted, it will form part of a vicious circle from which it is always difficult to extricate oneself. So I'm going to back up here a minute and just, reiterate and explain a little bit how I work with this. So he's saying, right, that when we let it happen without manipulating or exaggerating or denying it, it's going to run its natural course. And basically that's also in a way saying, how can we feel this without getting caught up in the judgment of the story, right? In some kind of mental aspect of it, right? Because it's the mental that kind of gets it in distortion. And so this is why I like a lot to work with just feeling the whole world through our sensory experience, direct sensory experience, right? And including our inner experience. So often we've been trained, to have a feeling, and then, we name that feeling as an emotion. And an emotion is really always a thought form feeling, right? It's never just a feeling. When we have a feeling, we actually go in and notice, there's, pressure in my heart, or there's, butterflies in my stomach, or, we have these sensations. And when we can just work with them, labeling them if we need to in this kind of way of sensation, instead of adding some, other implication with it, and stay just with the energy that sensation is, that to me is how we cleanly experience it. We don't have to be in the story. We don't have to figure out how to work with the story. We just have to go in and be with this energy. And as we are and giving it permission, it kind of naturally wants to move. It's like it's a wave that can come up through us, or if we take advantage of some recent trigger that, helps us. Oh, now I'm activated in that. So now I can sit and hold this, and I can welcome this movement, this feeling, this experience through me. So there's a form of meditation that I work with, that I call Pathwork process meditation, that is this kind of blend of mindfulness, I guess you would say, and, feeling our feelings. And so this is something that, in my own journey, I found, the best way to kind of actually, do what he's describing here. Another part of the vicious circle is the denied anger and rage for being made sad by life and by others. So oftentimes feelings are kind of layered. And so we might discover, and this is where, again, if we go in and just be with the sensations, they kind of take us through the layers of what's there. And so, we can find, these other levels. So I don't know if people are aware, or have any sense of, sadness, anger at being sad, or anger at life or somebody else for, or maybe anger at yourself for being sad, right? Are you angry at yourself for being sad? So now let us consider the feeling of anger. If it is cleanly experienced when someone perhaps damages or hurts you, it will resolve itself. It's kind of like you say, ow, and you push somebody off your foot. They step on your foot, it's like, so that's the natural kind of expression of the aggression, like active, boundary and no, stop, kind of energy of anger. Other people's denial of their inner truth, their real feelings, inflicts pain on you just as much as you inflict pain on others by not allowing yourself to experience what is, whether or not you intend to do so. This pain can be inflicted every bit as much by omission as by commission. The climate of omission in a child's life is indeed often more difficult to cope with because there is no actual occurrence to which one can connect the pain, so that it is harder to acknowledge and feel and thus eliminate it from your psychic stream. Your initial reaction to pain with anger is totally normal and healthy. Ouch, I don't like this, right? If you can understand that such a reaction does not require you to act destructively against others, you will accept the anger without judging or justifying yourself or others. So I think, anger is connected with this judging and justifying and self-righteousness and, other things like this, pride, I think, in self-righteousness. So, a lot of times we have to look at that, judgmental aspect, and usually where we're judging, it's often a projection, or it's reflecting that inner split inside of us. So, and when we're justifying ourselves, the same thing, we're kind of defending ourselves against an alleged outer accuser, but really it's probably a projection of an inner accuser inside of us. So if you let yourself feel it and follow it through to the pain, it will dissolve and it will liberate you. So again, if we're in anger, what we want to do is kind of try to go through, the anger and drop into the pain. In many ways, the anger is a defense against the pain. So again, we're trying to head for the pain. If you deny it, it will turn into cruelty and hostility, which in turn, as you well know, need to be covered up to conform with society's standards. And thus you become further alienated from what you really feel, and the original feeling becomes more distorted. Again, I think it kind of reflects back on sort of these shooters and all of this rage that seems to be coming out in the world now. Let us now see what happens when the original feelings of despair and loneliness are denied. When the inner person says, I should not have to ever feel this. I should be spared this experience of despair. By this denial, you turn your feeling of despair into bitterness, isolation, and faithlessness. The apprehension that there is no way out for you. If the original despair is experienced directly without conclusions, I think the guide often talks about, how we awfulize, so we're in a state of despair, but we think it's going to last forever, or, it's the only, real reality, or, we get caught in the mental concepts. And he says, if the original despair is experienced directly without conclusions and mental concepts, the feeling will dissolve relatively quickly. If you allow yourself to feel it without making something more of it and are attuned to what is happening in you, you will come out of yet another tunnel into the light of the life stream. When I speak of the clean experience of momentary despair, I do not mean the subtly forced hopelessness that results from a forcing current. So, he's introducing this concept of forcing current, which is an important one to discover and learn about as well. So the forcing current is a manipulative process that expresses into life and toward everybody whom one substitutes for those who caused the original hurt in childhood. And it basically conveys, you must now give me all I asked for. You must protect me from all unpleasurable feelings. That's the generic forcing current, right? It's like, I shouldn't ever have to feel anything I don't want to feel. My hopelessness will convince you that this is what you must do for me. When such irrational messages of the hidden self can be deciphered and admitted, the manipulative artificial hopelessness, which is always unbearable, will give way to a new insight, which will lead back to the clean original feeling one has avoided. So I don't know if anybody has that experience. I mean, I found this one was kind of the one that I had the least sort of sense of connection with. I used to have depression and despair, but, and certainly, sometimes I feel like in my cycle of recreation, like, here I am again, and feel bad about that, but I don't know if I would even classify that as despair at this point. But, there's this hopelessness. Do people resonate with that at all? Anybody want to speak to that experience of despair and hopelessness? Not one many of us are too familiar with, I guess, huh? So again, all of these feelings, including despair and helplessness, we're looking to discern the hidden messages and to make a step towards self-awareness, because all of these feelings, right, it's like they're creative and they have much more information. Like energy is information, energy is consciousness. And so the more that we can just be present in the moment with the energies that are alive within us, our inner experience, then, the more conscious we're going to become, and the more we're going to understand ourselves and be able to navigate. So if you can so discern your hidden messages, it will take a great step towards self-awareness, which will then enable you to experience original feelings and go through your tunnel, at whose end you will find the realistic good tidings of spiritual reality, that life is ultimately benign. And when I say ultimately, I don't mean in a faraway beyond. I mean that whenever you have the courage and the faith to truly feel and explore what is in you, when you let it happen, what is in you, when the hardened armor plate of your defense against unpleasant feelings is loosened up and you feel and you cry, you tremble and you writhe, and you experience directly and cleanly the original feeling, then all residual feeling will dissolve. And I want to speak to this too, even in that description, right? We think like kind of psychodrama, we need to produce that, but if we're truly in our body and feeling with the energies, that just happens spontaneously and naturally and feels completely, it feels good, right? It's like the body knows, again, what to do. And if we're not working with it, lost in some kind of story that says, oh, this is who we are, this makes us hopeless, or, everything is lost, or whatever our story is, but we're just in the energy, experiencing through it, we have this totally different way of, moving and letting the residual feelings dissolve. So the new experience of everyday living will be a wave of life as it comes to you. That's kind of right. Like this, there's different waves, and it's still kind of remembering, oh, don't resist, go with it, instead of each new wave we tend to unconsciously react to, right? So we're kind of like trying to ground and relax into and trust these waves that come to us. And You will not live behind a wall through which nothing can come to you and nothing can come out of you. That state is the true isolation of the disunified, fearful being who issues a forcing current into the world saying, I must not feel this, I say no to it, and is therefore in a state of tight denial and defense. Let us now take the feeling of fear. When you deny it, it becomes vague anxiety that is infinitely more disturbing because you have nothing to focus on and cope with. By facing the fear directly, you proceed into other feelings such as pain, despair, anger, and so on. Thus, the way out becomes possible. Remember, he's saying in the beginning, that we're afraid of our pain, we're afraid of our anger, we're afraid of all of these experiences, right? So fear is kind of like the main one. And so as we feel through the fear into what we're afraid of, thus the fear also dissolves and we feel through the fear. And anxiety is displaced fear, which as such offers no way out. So if you feel vaguely disturbed or irritated without really knowing what has happened to you, do not gloss over it. That will create further layers of disunity and disorientation. Focus on your sensations. Trust in the fact that something more tangible, something that you can deal with, waits for you to take it out of hiding. This will lead you to a fuller experiencing of your present and past feelings. And when you empty out the past accumulations, the present will truly be the present, rather than the illusion that you react to the present when you really react over and over to the past you keep avoiding. Any of you who truly decides to go into the nucleus of your being can do so at any time. It requires your decision to look, feel, and experience, to no longer project what is in you. When you can let a feeling, pain, fear, disappointment happen to you and go to its very end, its energy current transforms itself into its original life flow. Thus, when you no longer fear a feeling, then that feeling can no longer come to you. You must understand, my dearest friends, that anything undesirable that happens to you comes to you only because you say, no, I must not experience that. And what can I do to avoid it? Indeed, most people are motivated to start spiritual work like this because what they really seek are better ways to avoid the undesirable feelings. When it dawns on them that exactly the opposite direction must be taken, many leave the path unwilling to accept the truth that avoidance is futile. They insist on their illusion. It is therefore of utmost importance that you ask yourself to what degree you are afraid of a feeling in you. What feeling is it? For nothing outward can in itself be so frightening. Only what it will do to you, what unpleasurable feelings it will elicit in you. By going into the undesirable feeling, you will see the miracle happen as a stark reality, not as a principle you hear expounded, that the acceptance of pain makes the pain pleasure. The less you block pain, the more and the sooner will pain turn into pleasure. Thus, you witness the process of unifying duality. So let me pause here. This is a lot. How are people doing? You liking this? Is it a good lecture for everybody? Everybody's quiet tonight. We had a big discussion last time. Well, we'll let the guide continue. From this point, we shall go more and more into the deepest, most direct experiences of your residual feelings, alternating with present feelings. By learning to give up the fight against them, you will for the first time lose fear. I will help and guide you as usual. Start now. All who listen tonight and all who read these words, what are the feelings you fear? Really face that and then try to open yourself to the feared feelings and to let happen what you thought would be unbearable. You will see that many of the concepts I have discussed over the years are not mere faraway philosophies. They have a concrete and immediate meaning you can verify if you truly follow through. Quite a number of you have done this already and have found that what appears at first as a black, frightening abyss turns out to be a tunnel at whose other end you come into light. Everyone can experience this. It is never a bottomless abyss, for the true nature of light is not darkness, it is light. It is not destruction, it is construction. The evil, destructive, and demonic forces of life are rooted in the fear of experiencing what is in you, your feelings. Out of that fear, you build your destructive defenses. That is the only reason why any destructiveness sets in. The fear of feelings, of painful experiences, makes you arrogant and isolated, cruel and greedy, selfish and life-denying. Does that make sense? I mean, we can often see it also, in others as well as ourselves, right? Like what does create the arrogant, isolated, cruel, great, like they're trying to control their world, and keep themselves safe and free of pain. Yeah, they are and we are. It makes you untruthful on the inner and most vital level of your being. For if you deny what you feel, you are not in truth with yourself. All of this is evil, if you wish to use that word. Destructiveness lies exclusively in the walls you build against experiencing what is in you. You thus convert constructive energy into destructive energy. The inner lie of denying experience of the feeling self creates a falsification of your real self. It falsifies you until you no longer know who you really are. And this really is, a serious difficulty, right? This is the self-alienation that, and we create this mask self, that we think we should be, and we live through that, and we don't even recognize that there are other things within us, or that we really are not just this image that we've created of ourselves. So it creates the false hope that you can eliminate any undesirable feelings by avoiding them, and it creates the false hopelessness that the tunnel of painful feelings is a bottomless pit of horror and annihilation. So you got that, right? It's like there's a false hope that this belief kind of engenders that maybe somehow we can avoid these undesirable feelings. And then it also, in that, creates our fear and hopelessness that if we were to have these painful feelings, we would just be lost in a bottomless pit of horror and annihilation. So you waste your life energies by stemming against the truth, and so create unnecessary pain. The negation of your original pain in this life leads to greedy, insatiable demands, such as to be spared all frustration, to never be criticized, to always love, to be always loved and loved your way, until you recognize and abandon these demands and go through the original pain. You will be caught in a seesaw of submission and rebellion, which is another vicious circle. You submit to another's equally insatiable and unreasonable demands and join in a power struggle for control so that you can finally have the other do your bidding. And so I don't know, you were talking about relationship, you may recognize some of this, Walter, and the guide has a lot to say about relationship dynamics, so it'd be good to explore. You rebel because you are ashamed and hate yourself for your submission and believe you must prove your independence. In both instances, you violate the interest of your real self. In neither are you aware of the blind drivers that lead you into submission and or rebellion. You can truly be independent only when you cease making the demands. It will happen when you are willing to experience whatever comes to you, knowing that you have produced it and that it exists within you. Current psychology often says that a child is incapable of reacting differently to pain than by building its numbing defenses. This is true only when in previous lives residual pain was not experienced fully and thus eliminated. To the degree that a human being has done this, even in childhood, the severest of circumstances will be experienced in an undefended way. And I don't know, we've, people in different ways, they have this capacity, right? I've ran into people that, it's amazing that they're not more damaged than they are, right? So the pain will be endured and gone through until it finally ceases without leaving a mark just because it was fully felt. Feeling pain directly and fully strengthens resilience and the ability to live fruitfully and productively. And it certainly increases the capacity for experiencing pleasure and deep feelings. It is the living principle of do not resist evil. It requires blindness not to see that children actually have this capacity to a great degree. They can cry bitterly in 1 minute and laugh genuinely in the next, just because the pain has taken its natural course. It is only where pain has not been experienced that defensive numbness occurs, and hence neurosis, destructiveness, deadness. It is false to generalize that no child can help but react in this self-numbing way to all traumatic and difficult situations. May the power that is within your own inner being be allowed to fill your whole substance. I think he's closing this lecture, so let me pause. Any comments before we read the closing of the lecture? He usually closes with different blessings and, connected with the lecture. So looks like it's a nice closing. Anybody want to make any final comments on the lecture? You still with us, Jasmine?
I'm still here.
How was that for you?
This is a really good lecture. Sometimes things come when you need them. So, I was struggling with just old feelings. They're not as intense. So I'm glad I joined in. Yeah.
Very good. Great. Thank you. So go ahead and read our closing. The guide says, may the power that is within your own inner being be allowed to fill your whole substance, your whole organism, your spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical being. The full experience of your feeling self is spiritual hygiene and prevents the stagnation of your soul. It is the metabolism of your total organism. Just as the accumulation of physical waste that is not expelled and eliminated creates disease in the body, so does unassimilated, unexperienced feeling matter cause disease of the soul. Your full commitment to everything you can possibly feel, your observation of feelings you fear, and the events that bring forth those feelings, your commitment at last to try to face and experience them, constitute the healing process that will unify your entire being. This will make your life the fullest experience possible and will permeate you with the realization that you are using your life to its fullest and best with its deepest meaning. A lot of love is pouring forth for you all. May you be able to feel it. So I'm going to stop our share. Okay. So I enjoyed this lecture a lot myself. I feel like it's kind of the seminal piece. And of course, the guide has a few other lectures on emotional growth and feeling our feelings. And yet this one I felt like was a good reminder and spoke a lot of just kind of doing this within our own experiential sensory inner being, right? So, okay. Hope that was a good one for everybody.
Thank you, Darlene.
Yeah.
It was a good lecture.
Yeah, it's a real good lecture. Yeah, and I just think sometimes it's a little bit, it can be a little bit more, I don't want to say complicated, but once you start working on a hidden feeling, it's like a whole bunch of things, it's like a process that you start to go through. And yeah, I mean, I think that's sometimes why the path work, they say it's a narrow path, because sometimes, the reward at the end of sticking through the process part of feeling the feelings is, I don't know, honestly, it can be difficult.
Yeah, but I think this is where I think that I'm trying to teach the pathwork, something I believe. I don't know, maybe I'm, but most of the people, at least in my early days with the pathwork, how they approached it was through the story. And through the story includes the image, and the image is the unbearable pain. So it's a kick-ass painful process when you're dealing with it at that level. That's why I say, there's an easier way. We can feel all our feelings. We don't have to go at them from the history, from the story, from the, like, oh, I know I've got this thing and I have to work on it and I have to go feel my trauma again, and that means I have to remember the painful, dynamic or something like that. I mean, it may come up, but if you go directly into the body and the sensation of the experience, one, you are presencing and holding yourself in a completely different way than when you're identified in the story and you're trying to process it from the wounded child, right? So it's like there's some different tools and techniques, I think, that we are working with. And then you're right, some feelings are just deep and big, and I've been working with some forever and seem to still get triggered by them. The good thing about it, though, is that even though I'm still kind of muddling through, I'm no longer in any hard pain about them. I'm no longer judging myself for them. I'm no longer feeling like, oh, I'm bad because of them, kind of thing, right? And so that makes it a whole different experience as well.
Yeah. And, and I'm just speaking, kind of from where I am in my work, so this lecture was ideal, and it's a lot, it was a lot to take in, although there was pieces that I could say, okay, this is where I am,
Right.
So it was supportive for sure.
And I think where we get to like the one kind of like really kind of souled in feeling, or I don't know, like, sacred wound, maybe, that the one feeling that, is hardest to stand, it really is, like where we have to simply recognize that we need it, that's the way, and we have to ask for help and be willing. We can't really make ourselves go there, right? And life will probably take us there, and then when even when we're willing, we're still, like we even recognize, oh, here's the answer to my prayer. We're still going to kick and scream about it, right? But if we can do that and still activate or awaken the presence of the higher self, that can just go in and be with the sensation, that's there. Like, for instance, for me, like this death of helplessness, right? Or like part of it, I can even feel like when I'm standing in a line, and I want to keep going and I'm helpless because I'm stuck in the line, right? And there's something in that I have no idea why, but I can just feel my whole being going crazy. And my mind is sitting there. Well, I know I don't like to stand in lines very much, but that's not explaining, what all this is about. So there's always these deeper things that we have to keep excavating and keep wondering about, right? And question. So.
Yeah, that's what makes life exciting. You're onto something.
Right, exactly.
You're going to get to the end of the tunnel eventually, or it just keeps getting, like you keep chipping the iceberg, and then eventually it's like you look 10 years younger because you just revealed this consciousness that has been blocked. I mean, the
Right.
truth has been blocked, right? Through these blocked feelings. So once
Right.
you start chipping away and unblocking, you become more livened, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And it also distills, like at first it seems like it's everything, all of this, it's kind of like everywhere and different, and
Yeah,
then
like,
kind
hold
of
on.
slowly it kind of crystallizes into,
Yeah.
like more like a one thing piece of work. So,
Yeah.
or sort of a central
So that's
focus.
how
So,
I interpret that lecture. How about you, Frank? You've been quiet tonight too.
I have been quiet. I'm tired tonight, and so I just wanted to just listen. But I did think about some the way, some personal aspects along the way, like what do I fear the most? I suppose it would, the idea of it kind of plays with my image, my core image of, not being enough. So I guess I fear the most of not being enough in any particular situation, and the embarrassment of what it would feel like to not be enough in that situation, And so I would guard against ever being in that, getting to that point of feeling that feeling of not being enough and the embarrassment that comes along with it. I suppose I did that a lot in the course of my life. I don't do it so much anymore. And I would say that I probably had a big breakthrough, like when I first started performing. It took me a long time to get the courage to, get out there and play music in front of people. I was always thinking, oh my God, what if I'm terrible? What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? So it was a huge, it's like leap of faith, so to speak, to get to the point where, and I did. I mean, I had some bad moments on stage, and but there's nothing like having one of those moments to get through it.
And you didn't die.
Yeah, I didn't die. Yeah.
and exactly. So, and to bring forth our gifts into the world, we have to go through these blocks and fears, right? And that ultimately is where our fulfillment comes from. So, okay.
Do you think that being on stage and having to experience like one of the biggest fears that you had was actually like the medicine to help you have the breakthroughs? Like, because in the lecture, the guide says, like if you hide and isolate to avoid the pain of that outer experience, but it really brought you to the inner experience, right? So it was like a gift, right?
And always life is offering those gifts, right? And it's up to us whether we say yes, like Frank did, and go through it to the other side, or whether we run away again, right?
Yeah, particularly when the fear completely dissolves and you have a moment of like spontaneity on stage. And you're doing something that you didn't actually think you were capable of doing.
Right.
And then you're like, wow, completely validated.
Right. And now opening your channel to more of your higher self and more of your full being and expression. Yeah. And that's where we truly, find fullness and pleasure in life.
Well, your consciousness is not limited. Wow.
Well, thanks for joining us, Walter. I hope this was good for you.
Thank you all. Appreciate you having me.
We do this every 2 weeks. If you want to, stay on the list, I'll keep you on. Let me know if you want me to take you off of it. And, I just happy to, just kind of explore some of these lectures with everybody. So.
Sure.
It was nice meeting you, Walter.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Good night,
Thanks again,
everyone.
darling.
Bye.
Good night.
Good to see you again, Jasmine. Take care.
Good night.
Bye, Jasmine.
Night.
Bye.